Good afternoon, everyone. Time for another silver update. This is the daily chart of silver provided by netdania.com. You can click on the link below. Now I've drawn a few trend lines in here. One goes way back to the bottom in 2009 March, and this one stems from the beginning of 2010. Have a little bit different rate of ascent. The lowest one, if we correct back to that, it's going to be a price of $25. I don't think that's very likely. The other trend line is going to be here around $30 or so, $30 or $27. It's hard to say. But we do seem to be rounding up here through the MACD, crossing over, and we had a little bit of a move on Friday, but we're just slowly trying to inch back up to that $35 level. That's going to be a very important price. You can see that's been the price where we've had 3 attempts now. We had the bounce off from the initial sell-off, corrected at that. We had the attempted breakout through that price and failure, and now we just recently failed at that. So we're going to try that level for a 4th time to try to get through that level, or we may roll over and go down and test this trend line. We'll have to wait and see what the events are next week. Ultimately, silver is going much higher. The reason being that governments are bankrupt. That's going to be the main topic of the night, and the situation is not getting better at all. But before we do that, let's look at some questions. First question is from 49s. This is about Harvey Organ. Hi, Brother John. I followed your link to Harvey Organ's site and appreciate his commentary, but his daily trading report baffles me. Day after day, week after week, month after month, there is very little change in the registered silver and total of all silver. They have stayed in the 35 million and 141 million ounce amounts, respectively, for over a year. This appears to challenge the notion that silver is becoming scarce. Sometimes the numbers even climb. Many silver commentators make the point that supply should be dwindling in the face of endless price suppression, but this does not seem to be playing out. Do you think the stated registered and total amounts are just part of the silver manipulation? By the way, thanks for promoting peace and tolerance. Also, congratulations on your raw dietary choice. As a raw vegan for the past 11 years, I can guarantee that you will experience substantial health benefits. Many blessings. So, the main question is the numbers that Harvey Organ reports every day. Now, I really don't pay much attention to those numbers. You have to remember that only about 5% of the silver that's mined and consumed every year in the world is actually delivered on the COMEX. So the COMEX is primarily a paper market. It's people trading pieces of paper back and forth. It doesn't really have a lot to do with silver. And when we look at the volumes, if we look at the amount of ounces that are actually delivered in a year on the COMEX, as opposed to the number of ounces that are traded every day, it's just a tiny fraction. So by and large, it's just a gigantic paper market. Are these numbers real? I don't know. They don't really mean that much to me. I think they're going to continue the manipulation until the last ounce. I think they've made that pretty clear. What's the last ounce? Well, the last ounce is going to be when either investors or manufacturers can't get the silver they need, and that's going to be the last ounce. That's when the game's going to be over. I believe they will manipulate it until they get down to that last ounce. So what does that mean? Well, they've been doing so for many years. The amount of silver, the stockpiles, turned negative in about 2006, and the U.S. government had used up all their silver of the billions of ounces that they had that they'd been dumping for those years. So we're approaching the day when we reach that last ounce of silver. I don't know when that will be. You're not going to see it reported in the numbers because most of the numbers are fabricated. So I don't put a lot of stock in those numbers. And the next question is a little bit on the same topic. This is from Egg Descrambler. Hi, Brother John. If your latest video on silver price suppression was great, and the article from Jeff Nielsen also. I forwarded this to a friend, and he said you and Jeff showed fairly conclusively that the silver price is being suppressed, but he said you guys didn't address the why. He asked me, why is it being suppressed, in your opinion? I gave them an answer, but how this started back in 1873, how the industry is benefiting from this low price, but I don't think I have all the answers. I'd very much appreciate if you would chip in on this. Why do you think so? Why the banks didn't let the ratio go back to 15-1, either back in the 1990s or either now? Sounds like they're caught in a lie and they need to keep that lie going, but it's not a clean answer. Thanks in advance. Well, I think that, in my opinion, the people behind the silver price suppression are the same group of people who were behind the London gold pool, and that's going to be the government trying to prop up the value of the dollar. Silver is very rare now. It's very scarce. The number of dollars that are out there could not possibly chase after the amount of physical silver that's out there. If even a tiny fraction of those dollars, if a tiny fraction of the holders of those dollars lost confidence in those dollars and those dollars went into physical silver, then obviously that would be an avalanche rush, and there just isn't enough silver to satisfy that demand, even if it were just a tiny fraction of dollar holders. So that would cause an explosive price rise in silver, and that would be a thumbs down vote in the confidence of the dollar and the confidence of all fiat currencies. So silver, of course, is the people's money as opposed to gold, which is the banker's money. That's another reason. So there's a lot of reasons why they're doing it. The other one mentioned here is the Silver Users Association. Industry has benefited for a long time by using up very cheap silver, and unfortunately industry in the future is going to pay the price when they have to pay a very, very much higher price for silver, because they did not let the price of silver rise, which would have caused recycling, which would have caused more mining. So the suppression ultimately is going to damage the very industry that has benefited by it up until this point. But I guess most of that industry is no longer in the United States, so maybe that's going to damage the industry overseas when they have to pay higher prices for silver, and maybe there's a Chinese involvement in this whole thing. So let's get to the main story of the night, and I'm going to read an article first that I posted to the blog. This is about Governor Quinn in Illinois, and this is from a left-leaning pro-union blog, but that's where I got the article. We'll read a little bit of this and then investigate the facts. Quinn goes after collective bargaining again, terminates AFSCME contract, most anti-labor governor ever. Rich Miller's Capital Facts broke the story this evening, but it just supports what I've been saying for months. Pat Quinn is the most anti-labor governor in the history of Illinois. And there's your labor. Now, first of all, I don't consider these people labor, and I think that's just absurd to even use that term. I guess labor refers to people who belong to unions, so in that case they are labor. But for me, labor means people who actually labor for a living rather than feeding at the public trough. So I don't really consider them to be laborers. I consider people who are miners and manufacturers and people like that laborers. These are just overpaid civil servants, and we'll see that in a bit. But you can see I've predicted that the pension funds are going to go bust for the public sector workers. Their pay is going to be drastically cut. It's an inevitability. Either that or they're going to be paid with hyperinflation and worthless dollars. But the numbers just don't add up. The piggy bank is empty. The cookie jar is broken and empty, and they're going to have to sustain massive cuts in their pay, benefits, and pensions, if not completely done away with. So I'll read a little bit more. While the Republican Scott Walkers of this world have their own ways of going after union collective bargaining rights, Illinois Democrats are no slackers. And then here's the union's announcement about Quinn's announcement. And then the Quinn administration made a response, and this was their response. After 11 months of bargaining, we informed AFSCME's leadership Tuesday that there will be no more extensions of their contract that expired in June. Governor Quinn has cut state spending down to 2008 levels and proposed closing empty or half-empty, very expensive state facilities that are no longer needed. After decades of mismanagement, the state is behind on $8 billion of payments to vendors, including social service agencies, and the state's pension shortfall has risen to $96 billion, the worst of the 50 states. During 11 months of bargaining, the state has extended the contract 3 times and made significant efforts to compromise. But the Government Employees Union, which has not offered a single proposal to deal with retirement health care, continues to seek millions of dollars in pay hikes, and the taxpayers cannot afford to give it to them. It has refused to recognize the extraordinary financial crisis squeezing the state. So that's the governor's statement. Now, the left-leaning, pro-union, pro-government union people are outraged, and they'll be marching in the streets. But let's actually look at the numbers, and I think when you see the numbers, you are going to be as shocked as I was when I saw the numbers. So let's start out with the website that I pulled this from is actually an accountability site that is at the state of Illinois. It's accountability.illinois.gov, and it's the state of Illinois' transparency and accountability page. Governor Pat Quinn up at the top. And the first thing I did was just a search by agencies, and this number, I put it in a spreadsheet and totaled it. It comes to about $15 billion. That is the total amount of compensation that is just wages. This is just wage compensation. You can see health care and family services is almost $5 billion worth of wages. Revenue, almost $3 billion. So apparently it takes a lot of taxpayer money to collect taxpayer money. Then there's the Board of Education, Transportation, Human Services. So that's a whole nother social service group, and it goes on. All of it adds up to about $15 billion. And of course, that doesn't include the pension payments. And you can see from this chart, this is from the state as well. And this is actually from the governor's budget for fiscal year 2013. You can see the incredible rise in pension contributions out of taxpayer monies. So as they cut back on services, they increase their contribution to these state workers' pensions. And trust me, these pensions are very lavish. Anyone in the private sector would kill to get even a fraction of these pensions that state workers have. Not to mention the benefits, which I'm going to go over. But let's look at some of the numbers here and play with this page at ITAP. Now, one that I did was I just started searching by letter. I'll show you how to use this. I started and went through the letters. We'll go and do the letter P here. And then what you can do is you can go over to the gross pay column and you can prioritize this by pay. And you can see this job category, Public Service Administrator, number 37015. I've pulled that out here in the PDF. You can see this is the job, Public Service Administrator, position code 37015. And yes, they are hiring, plenty of them still. And it's just a generic job description. You can see what's kind of interesting. You would think when you see the pay that this would be a very, very important position. It looks like it's a mid-level manager, essentially. And what I found to be very interesting looking through this job description is when we get down to the requirements. Education and experience requires knowledge, skill, and mental development equivalent to completion of 4 years of college. So that's correct. It doesn't even require a college degree. You just simply have to, which I'm not big on college degrees or college degree equivalents, but it's sort of shocking to see the liberal-leaning, education-worshiping crowd not even requiring a college degree for this position in public administration. And let's get back to the ITAP and look at this. You can see that this position paid a total of $281 million. That's year to date. That's 2012. That's how much money the state of Illinois has paid just to this one position. So let's look at this position. Now you can see it's broken down by departments, and if you click the gross again, you can get the big ones in this, and that's going to be Human Services, Children and Family Services, Healthcare and Family Services. There's a nice little bureaucratic title. Central Management, sounds like the movie Brazil. You've got Public Health, and then Corrections, Employment Security. So totaled, remember, these were hundreds of millions of dollars. Now let's drill down and we'll go to Human Services. And here's the list of the employees. We'll click the gross pay again and we will calculate it from the top. Here's your pay for this position starting with the top. Remember, this is year-to-date gross pay. So the year's not even over. There's still more than a month left in the year. And we have people making $150,000. You can see these are all over $100,000. We've got 10 pages. There's actually 789 of these people. And these are just in the agency of Human Services. There are a whole bunch of others as well. So let's go to the second page. You can see second page. Here we go. We're in the 90s. Third page, we're still almost at $90,000. This is year to date, people. This is what these people have made just so far this year. And on it goes. You can go and you can explore it yourself. So the first reply is going to be, one of the responses is always, well, it takes such a higher level of skill and education. Well, it doesn't take a college degree. Now let's go and look at one of the low-level positions. So I found that when I was going through A, and we'll look at the gross pay, and it's going to take a while to calculate because there's so much government, it's bogging down the computers to calculate it. You can see here, Administrative Assistant 00501. That's the entry level. We also have Admin 2. They've doled out $28 million to these administrative assistants, and $17 million for Administrative Assistant 2. So let's take a look at the Administrative Assistant, and oh, here we go. We've got all of our government agencies again, and at the top, of course, there's Human Services once again, and we'll go into Human Services and take a look at the pay of our administrative assistants, and there you go. So we have one administrative assistant who's already made $94,000 this year, but you can see most of them are bunched up around $60,000. They drop down to $50,000. So we're talking $50,000 to $60,000, and as an administrative assistant, let's just go ahead and see if we can pull the janitors just for giggles here, and see what the janitors are making. So here's our janitors, and it appears that we have the biggest number of janitors, a juvenile justice specialist. We paid out $39 million. Oh, okay, that's not a janitor. Wow, that is shocking. I don't even know what that one is. Let's take a look at that one. I didn't research this one. We've got people in the juvenile justice system. And look, we've got 674 people in the juvenile justice system, and this juvenile justice specialist is making $70,000 so far this year. So let's get back to the janitor and see what the janitor makes. Janitor 1, this is just the base level janitor, and they work for Central Management. And you can see our janitors are making $60,000 roughly. That's at central management. And we can also look at janitor 2. And we also have another janitor. We have janitor 1, and janitor 2. Our janitor 2 in central management, again, about $60,000. So we have a $60,000 a year janitor. And now let's look at some of these benefits, and we'll see if they match what you get in your job. First of all, we've got the vacation days. You can see here that once you hit 10 years, you have 4 weeks of vacation, and you get 5 weeks of vacation. So that's fairly close to some in the private sector. Now you have to remember, they get 12 holidays. Do you get 12 holidays? They get 12 holidays. So they get 12 holidays and their vacation. And they also get personal days, and they also get sick leave. Now, their sick leave is accrued at 1 day per month of service, so they have 12 sick days in a year. So they have 12 sick days, 4 weeks of vacation, 12 holidays, and they have a lot of other benefits as well. Now, let's look at the pension calculator, because this is going to be what they get when they retire. So I took our wonderful public service administrator and took the average pay, and you can see at the bottom you have your final average compensation calculation. This is used to calculate the employee benefits, and here's how they do it. They take 48 of the highest consecutive months of service within the last 120 months, okay? So in your last 10 years, they're going to take your highest 48 months. So we all know about the stuffing that goes on, where they will work as much as they can for 48 months consecutive in their last 10 years and make as much as they can. So this number probably isn't even accurate, but I use 9,000 a month. That's roughly what that public administrator job pays. I assumed that they got into that job out of college, although it doesn't require a college degree. And so about 22 years, and they worked it their whole life and retired at 65. So working that course, if you worked in the private sector, you'd probably be laid off 20 times during that period of time. But they worked 43 years and retired at 65. They had that monthly pay of $9,000, and that gives us a estimated monthly pension benefit of $6,500. That's what they're going to collect every month for the rest of their lives. So you can see why the governor has to increase this amount of taxpayer money that he's dumping into the pensions of these people feeding at the public trough, and it's going to have to get a lot higher. And as the taxpayer who has been laid off, downsized, pay reduced, the public sector pensions are growing and are very, very lavish. Of course, anyone would kill to have that job who's in the private sector, but good luck getting that. I went through some of the job postings, and yes, there's a lot of job postings, but it's all government claptrap and stuff that you have to, hoops you have to jump through. So there's a lot of jobs, but it may be difficult to meet their strange rules that they have. So there you have it. Your yelling and screaming public sector union workers from the state of Chicago, or from the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, who are bankrupting the budget, driving business out of the state, collapsing government finances. They continue, and they want more. They're feeding at the public trough, and they can't get enough, and they're ultimately going to destroy the entire state budget. And of course, all of this is going to be defaulted on, and these people aren't going to get a penny of their pensions. When Wall Street and the Federal Reserve are done with it, there isn't going to be anything left. Of course, the taxpayer is going to be broke as well. So then you're going to have a situation like you have in Greece, and you're going to have austerity. And then the people you're going to see rioting in the streets are these people who aren't going to get what they were promised. And they're not going to get what they were promised because it's simply impossible. They're already making 2 to 3 times the wages that the private sector makes, and they're making 5 to 6 times the pension that the private sector makes. And of course the taxpayer is paying for all this, and that's just so lopsided that there's no way it can continue, and anything that can't continue won't continue. So it's going to be very exciting in the future to see how these people react when something that was too good to be true turns out to be too good to be true. And we'll talk to you next time.